this afternoon with representatives from the Department of Rehabilitation. And this is going to be designing for everyone, so leveraging partnerships with DOR and supporting students with disabilities. I know a lot of the organizations who are building out apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship models are looking to bring in candidates of all sizes and shapes and personalities and stripes and whatnot. We're really looking for the best candidates that are out there. And one of the key partnerships that is developing, especially under WIOA, is a partnership with the Department of Rehabilitation, Vocational Rehabilitation. And I'm really glad to have them on the call today because this is a relationship that for years, maybe even decades, has been rather underutilized, and there's some really hot talent when it comes to serving employers and getting in candidates into programs who can really excel in places that sometimes the general population is not even used to or thinking about. Just as a little background, I think some of the folks on the call know that myself, I'm Caleb Van Docto. I'm with Social Policy Research Associates, and my background is in working with blind and visually impaired individuals of all sizes and stripes, students all the way up to the elders in our community. And I've seen a lot of really incredible, super sharp, super capable individuals over my time. And so I'm really glad to have with us Teresa Wu, who's the district administrator in San Francisco, as well as June So. Matter of fact, our relationship goes back a little bit farther than that. But why don't I first give Teresa and June an opportunity to just quickly introduce themselves and maybe a little bit background of your role at DOR. Teresa?
Sure. So I'm Teresa Wu. Nice to meet you all. I've been with the Department of Rehabilitation for 22 years. I worked for, 19 years in the Greater East Bay District, so the East Bay part of the Bay Area, and been here in the San Francisco District for 3.5 years. Before I worked at the department, I worked with individuals with intellectual disabilities in Santa Clara County at an agency called Hope Services. And currently, as the district administrator, I lead our rehabilitation teams in 5 branch offices in Marin, San Francisco, and San Mateo counties. And so all aspects of the teams, from employment and working with our consumers to hiring qualified personnel to work with the people we serve.
Hi everyone, this is June. I have been working with Department of Rehab for over 24 years. I'm a district operation manager. I oversee the contract, training, and accounting department. Prior to my position, I was a team manager for 3 years. Also, I was a counselor, rehabilitation counselor for over 17 years. I started with the TPP counselor, which is work for the school kids. Then I worked for 9 years as a mental health counselor. Then I worked 5 years for the vision impairment and blind. Prior to my DOR career, I worked for the nonprofit. I worked as a mental health counselor and corner house. Also, I worked for the DOR as the employment specialist. Yeah, nice to see everybody in the cyber world. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you both. And before we really dive in, I want to do just a quick little bit of housekeeping because we are operating off of a new webinar system, at least one that's new to myself, probably new to a number of the grantees. We're transferring over from the CCC Confer system. So we're using Zoom. It looks like everybody got on and didn't have too much difficulty getting on, which is fantastic. As we go along, I certainly encourage anybody, if they have questions or ideas or things that they want to pose, you should have access to a chat box by hovering your mouse or moving your mouse over the screen. You should see a ribbon that pops up. Mine pops up on the lower half of the screen that pops up, and there are little icons when you hover over them for invite, participants, screen share, and chat. If you click on that chat sign, it will bring up a chat box, and I would encourage you to drop questions in there if you don't want to forget them. My expert colleague Eduardo is on the backsides, and he'll help manage some of those as well. And as we get along in the presentation and towards the end, we'll make sure to hit those questions if you feel particularly shy about asking directly or asking out loud. Alternatively, there will be an opportunity at the end as well to raise questions and have a little bit of a discussion. Our hope is that this will provide some insight into what DOR is and ways that you can partner with the agency in your particular area. So with that, let me start by just posing a couple of overview questions about DOR. I want to give everybody a perspective, just a quick snapshot perspective of exactly who DOR serves and how they operate in partnership with the workforce system. So I'm wondering, Teresa or June, if either of you could describe the consumers or the participants or individuals, I'm not sure how you want to say it, but who you serve in terms of individuals. And then also I want to ask about employers after that.
The consumer one.
Okay. Basically, we provide the employment services to the consumer, which is the individual with the disabilities. We provide training and all other like job coaching and transportation if they're in the plan, also tuition to work their employment goal. DOR mission is a work, and work, you know, not just say, come over and say, I want to go to school, right? We need to have a clear employment goal. Our goal just want to support the individual with the disability to obtain the gainful employment to live in the community independently and pursue their gainful employment and quality life. Yeah. Teresa, do you have any over there?
I'll work on the employer piece. So we've worked with employers in different ways over the years. Initially, we worked predominantly with employers through agencies we contract with, and we still do that. Probably about 15 years ago, Sacramento developed a workforce development section who oversees all statewide workforce initiatives. And then from that, they decided that wasn't enough. So then we started within our districts to have employment specialists on our team. So that way, when there's a more of a regional approach to working with employers, they know who to contact. And in the San Francisco area, it's Ricardo Perez, but he is out of the office today. And June actually supervises Ricardo. And so he does more of the regional development with employers. We are also a mandated partner on the workforce boards throughout the country. And I serve on the one for San Francisco City and County. And so I hold the chair. The reason why Department of Rehab is a mandated partner is we always have to make sure we consider disability as a piece of the employment puzzle. And so when the board is not sure about a direction, I have to be sure to be that squeaky wheel and make sure that we remember about accommodations and how we can outreach to future employees with disabilities.
Fantastic. Okay, so it sounds like, if I understand correctly, that Department of Rehabilitation actually has a required partnership, and I suppose a member, someone on the staff at Department of Rehab regionally who is part of workforce boards in every region of California. Is that correct?
Correct. It's typically a district administrator such as myself, and some of our districts are really big and have many counties. So in that case, the board person may be a team manager.
Great. Okay. So, June, I know you also mentioned that the Department of Rehab worked with individuals through setting up like a plan, for instance. And I'm thinking about how our apprenticeship programs, oftentimes, they are connected with school districts. They may receive referrals from community colleges or adult schools. They may have partners, community service partners in the area. They identify students who maybe want to participate and oftentimes have to develop some sort of screening model or whatnot. And I'm thinking about, when individuals are receiving services from Department of Rehabilitation, is the relationship that the individual has, is that something that is made with an external entity like, say, an education partner or an apprenticeship program partner, or is that a relationship with Department of Rehab and the individual? Could you talk maybe a little bit more about that individual relationship?
Okay. Some of the individuals, they come to our front door to apply to our services. Some of the individuals, they refer by the school district or community college, or even though they're friends, they're counselors, Number one, our services are free. Number two, we welcome everyone to apply our services. However, we need to have some documentation at this time to approve they have a disability. Maybe from the doctor, psychologist, or psychiatrist, or even though the school psychologist, the license. Yeah. Then to approve they're eligible for our services. After that, we can do a plan based on the client's choice or our assessment result, because we send client to situational assessment, vocational, assessment, especially for some of the young kids. They don't know what to do. They just say, oh, we want a job, Therefore, sometimes we have to go through some of the assessment phase to determine what's the best for their goal, what's the best for them to succeed, because we don't want to set up our consumer, failures. Yeah, that's how it's
got it.
So everybody can. Yeah, go ahead.
So it sounds like an individual, a participant, a consumer of DOR may contact the Department of Rehabilitation office in their local region. Individually, they may come in saying, oh, I want to participate in this apprenticeship program. I have this employment goal, but I think I may need some help receiving accommodations in order to participate in the job or in the program, or maybe some preliminary training that will help me accomplish getting into that. So it sounds like they would contact their office, get connected with, I suppose, a counselor at a local office?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They even can go to our front desk and say, I would like to apply for services. Then we give the intake packet. Then they fill out the form and mail it back to us. Then we give to the appropriate counselor. Depends on their disability and
How long does it take if an individual applies to the Department of Rehabilitation? They're looking for some particular accommodation. How long does that enrollment process generally take?
Well, that's based on case by case, depends on the disability, depends what kind of accommodation they need. Sometimes the accommodation could be just, under $50, have something really simple, or some people may need a chair, some people more expensive, like the blind folks, they may need the computers and all the other AT equipment. Depends. We cannot give a day, how many days, so specific, because we work for the human being, everybody individual case.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also based on their needs, what kind of job they got.
And just to cite, AT is assistive technology. So that might be something like screen reading software on a computer screen, for example, or something like that.
Yeah, well, of course, we need to do an evaluation. Then sometimes we can go to the work setting and see what's the environment like, and we do an evaluation, the AT evaluation. When I was a counselor for the blind, sometimes I go there with the evaluator. Then we do an evaluation and see what's the best equipment, of course, the cost effective to meet that. Yeah.
Great. So it sounds like if there's individuals that are interested in participating in an apprenticeship program, and it's anticipated that an accommodation, that they may need an accommodation, if the individual is not already connected with the Department of Rehabilitation, it may be wise for programs to suggest or recommend, or perhaps just inquire if the individual is connected with the Department of Rehab ahead of time. Because if there is an evaluation process that needs to take place, then making sure that that is taken care of ahead of time before enrollment timelines happen and students get up and going would help expedite the process.
Yeah. For example, if they already have a medical report from the doctor, we always encourage them to bring a copy, and that way we don't have to go through, send them to the doctor. Of course, depends how old is the document.
Okay. So there is an application period.
Yeah, of course. Because we're a government agency, we have some of the mandate steps, and we have some paperwork need to taking care of it,
So I want to transition just a little bit. One of the things we had a recent learning lab at American River College this past summer, and one of the pieces that we spoke about at the lab was around the ideas of universal design and universal design for learning. And it's something that I know programs are thinking about how they can build their programs so that anybody can participate in them. Essentially building out apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship models that really encourage opportunities for participants to understand the information that's being provided, engage with it, and be able to express their experiences concurrently. Just to remind the folks on the line, Universal Design for Learning, there's 3 core principles, that being multiple modes of engagement, multiple modes of expression, and multiple modes of participation for people to learn in all sorts of different ways, and to share and get meaning and information across. I know that certainly a lot of individuals that the Department of Rehabilitation works with are already operating, they're already living or going to school in colleges, they may be working in high schools, they may be working in a job or doing some, on-the-job training in some way, shape, or form. And so I'm curious if there's, any example, if you could provide some examples of the types of program models that Department of Rehabilitation may authorize or may provide to their consumers, just to give us a perspective of the sorts of training resources or training approaches that Department of Rehab has historically provided.
So, it's all extremely individualized, but let's say if somebody is at a public university, such as a community college or, like a state university or a UC, all of those schools have some kind of program that's like a disability resource center. So they have a counselor who could look at what are their preferred learning and testing modes, so that they can be accommodated in the classroom. So we look at that. Some of the private schools don't have such a person, or if they do, it is just one person. It isn't a whole department. Also, many of the schools have an assistive technology lab. So they have computer access, such as Kurzweil, or they may have JAWS or Dragon Naturally Speaking, different kinds
These
of
are all
assistive
like
technology.
assistive technology. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, all assistive technology, so they can be able to read textbooks, they'll be able to write papers, and if they have any repetitive stress injuries, they can do it through voice, so they don't have to use their hands. I mean, there's all kinds of different technology. Some people, it's becoming more popular to do some online training. So if they're doing it from their home or maybe from a library, we got to make sure that they have the technology to be able to access the training program so that they can get it done. We also find that in some academic settings, maybe the instructors or professors are not versed on working with people with a variety of learning needs. So sometimes we'll do disability awareness training in school settings. I remember when I was in the East Bay, I was working with a construction trades program, and they would not accept the people we served because they said, well, people with disabilities can't do construction. So I went in there and actually trained all of their whole department in the construction trades, and they realized that they probably were serving people with disabilities, they just didn't know it. And that way they were more sensitive in working with their student population.
That's interesting. I actually came across a report that was recently put out by I'm spacing on the college at the moment that's in upstate New York, but does a lot of disability statistics work. It'll come to me later. But anyway, the report indicated that 1 in 5 Americans have a disability. That's working, not working. No, excuse me, that was 16 to 64. So that was working age individuals. 1 in 5 have a disability. There are absolutely people who are already operating with a disability. And along that thread, I am actually reminded that oftentimes, we would see, when I was working with my community agency several years ago, we would see employers who would receive disability training in one way, shape, or form, and they might institute some sort of technology or some sort of program or some sort of policy. Say, for instance, making online computer templates for, say, memos that would go out in the company. They would actually have settings that made the font sizes automatically slightly larger rather than slightly smaller, and suddenly everybody benefited because, oh, I didn't realize how bad my eyes were. Actually, this is easier to read, just having these little ticky-tacky fixes that benefit not just people who may have disabilities, but also people who have residual things. Universal, that all this is to say is that universal design principles oftentimes benefit everybody as a whole, and it makes it easier for everybody, even if it's not something that they thought about. That leads me to actually ask, does Department of Rehabilitation provide disability awareness training? And is that something that programs could access?
Yes, we do provide it free. We provide it to employers. I've had, again, when I was in the East Bay, we had a special hiring program for people with disabilities. It's called the Step Up program. And it actually had to be a ballot measure because these are government employees. So they actually put it on the ballot that they were going to go in this direction and hire people with disabilities without having to take an exam, as long as they were certified by the Department of Rehabilitation. Well, once that got passed and we started to institute the program, they wanted us to go out and to train all these departments. I remember the very first one was the county voter registration. I had to train all these voter registration people, and then it was the General Services Administration, all these different departments. And so in a year we trained like 1,000 employees for Alameda County on disability awareness, so that they would accept colleagues that may have a disability, as well as managers to know how to work with a person with a disability.
Wow, that's fantastic. So this is something that is available for employers. Is it something that programs could or would participate? And
Yes,
I would also want to ask
we did it
about
in training programs. We've done it with training programs. We've done it with nonprofit organizations. I've done it with America's Job Centers. Done it with workforce boards. All different kinds of groups that would like to learn how to work with individuals with disabilities.
That's great. So I do want to ask a question, get a little bit more detailed about how Department of Rehab connects with and or interfaces with employers itself. And I'm not entirely sure how close or how related this might be, but I know, years ago when I was doing some partnership work with DOR, that they had started to develop some statewide initiatives around business engagement. I think it was close to the time when the business specialists started coming on the scene and showing up around the state. And so my question is, does the Department of Rehabilitation maintain direct contact or direct relationships with employers? And if so, are they ones where they're able to open up employers to opportunities for programs that consumers of the Department of Rehabilitation may be participating in, like apprenticeship programs?
Yes, we do work directly with employers, and then sometimes we develop with a particular employer maybe a special training program. Those take a little time to get organized. It's not like you go into an employer and say, oh, okay, let's start this tomorrow. We have all different types of collaborations. I'm in the process of setting up one right now with an employer, and I'm working with an agency that will be doing the training, so that at the end of the training, the employer has the goal of hiring 10 individuals. This is in the high-tech field. I think we probably have seen models out there, particularly people on the autism spectrum. There's a lot of interest in the tech industry to work with people on the spectrum, and as long as they have the specialized training for whatever that company wants them to learn.
Oh, that's interesting. What kind of, can you give us a sense? You said tech firms. Are these employers of all sizes, I presume?
Yeah, we've had partnerships like this with Google, with IBM. There's one in the Silicon Valley. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
There's at least one in the Silicon Valley.
It's SAP.
Oh, yes,
SAP also, yeah. Mm-hmm. Those are just a few off the top of my head.
Sure, that's great. So I want to remind folks, if there's any particular questions that are popping up, feel free to drop them in the chat box if you want. I did want to ask a couple of additional questions before opening up the floor, and mostly around how programs themselves would engage with Department of Rehabilitation. I know that now DOR is a mandated partner under WIOA, and so as we talked about a little bit earlier, there are district administrators who are now part of, it sounds like, regional workforce boards that are operating in different areas. How would an apprenticeship or a pre-apprenticeship program connect with Department of Rehabilitation just to open up that new partnership? Is there an individual in a particular region they should reach out to? Should they go and knock on the front door of their local DOR office? How would that work?
So they would work with each district has a regional employment coordinator, and so they would reach out to that person. And in our area, it's Ricardo, who's not here with us today. And then they generally reach out to me because, you know, my counterpart in that region, because we're already sitting on the workforce board. So usually what happens is they'll reach out to one of us, and then the three of us together will sit down and have some initial conversations and decide who else of our two entities need to be a part of this collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Great. And would they be able to find the DOR offices, say, through the workforce boards, or perhaps just a simple Google search, I suppose?
They could do both. Most boards list who all their board members. Every board has a website, and they list the board members, and they would, you know, it depends. They all are very organized differently. But for San Francisco, there is a bio on each of us, so they would know where I work. And then, of course, the best way, if you want to look at a specific office, is to go to our website, which is www.dor.ca.gov.
www.dor.ca.gov. dor.ca.gov. Great, thanks.
And what you could do, just to finish that up, once you go to our website, it's very user-friendly. If you aren't sure which office serves, they list all the counties, but, you know, sometimes we get people that are new to the area. They may not even know what county they're in, but they might know what zip code they're living in. They could type in the zip code, and that will reference which office that's closest to them.
That's great. So it sounds like, you know, thinking about a little bit of forward planning, and just to kind of circle back to some of the conversation, some of the nitty-gritty conversations we were talking about earlier when it comes to individuals who may be participating in apprenticeship programs. It sounds like when it comes to specific accommodations or adaptations that an individual may need, that they're going to have that personal relationship with DOR. However, if programs are already on the radar of their local offices, they're connected with the workforce boards, then it becomes essentially a known entity of a program that's operating in a particular area. And I would imagine it makes the entire relationship a little bit easier to move through as people are looking to participate in a program if they have a disability. Mm-hmm. Great. So I also know that apprenticeship itself, while you guys are, you know, disability experts, that the idea of apprenticeship is a relatively new thing that's happening in the state. At least the initiative, I shouldn't say that apprenticeship itself is new, obviously, but that the push for apprenticeship and incorporating that between the partners of workforce systems across the state is, there is a big push that's happening now. And so the concept of opening up apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship pipelines for everybody, including individuals that may have barriers to employment, is still relatively new for Department of Rehabilitation, or something that's fairly recent. And I think, you know, in an earlier conversation, I had caught Ricardo this past week at a meeting of the minds, as a matter of fact, in Monterey, and he mentioned that Department of Rehab was partnering with DIR.
Yes, Department of Industrial Relations. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so I wonder if you could share with us any kind of initiatives that are happening maybe a little bit more at the state level that DOR is taking, and that'll maybe give us a little bit of a window of how at a local level, at a programmatic level, the activities that we're doing can align with the movements that are happening a little bit higher up.
So I should back up and say, I don't know the exact year, but I want to say sometime last year, our governor in California invested part of the budget into community colleges to develop apprenticeship programs. And so you talked about going to the Meeting of Minds a couple of weeks ago. Well, I was at the Meeting of Minds last year, and all of a sudden, all these community colleges were going into, which is basically a labor conference, a California labor conference. So it was great because I'd been before. I never saw the community colleges. I mean, this is like probably 100 staff went to Meeting of the Minds. Because they needed to align their academic training to what California as a whole system of employers, what is needed out there. Because, you can take this great training in school, doesn't mean it's going to get you a job. I think we've all been there and done that.
Yeah.
And so that was like the first step. And then the second step was really working with state agencies on developing an apprenticeship system. And so again, because we are the disability experts for the state, it was realized that a lot of people with disabilities were not tapping into apprenticeships. Mainly, like I shared my earlier example, a lot of apprenticeships have been more physical labor kinds of jobs, and our more traditional clientele may have felt like they couldn't get accommodated, or they could do the job, maybe they didn't have a physical restriction, but they were still discriminated against and not getting the apprenticeship. Well, apprenticeships have really expanded quite a bit, and they aren't just doing the construction trades, the electrician, all that good stuff. They started branching out into IT and cosmetology and hotel and just a lot of different areas that maybe you could have gotten the training at a school somewhere, but it wasn't an apprenticeship. So that has really leveled the playing field, not only in the disability, but just in terms of people with a variety of vocational interests.
Yeah, matter of fact, I know we have a number of those folks probably on the call now. We've seen healthcare and childcare as well, or a couple of
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like we know that there's just this large scale push. So is there some sort of link, specific link or specific efforts that are happening with Department of Industrial Relations?
Well, here in San Francisco, we have a regional office with the Department of Industrial Relations. They're just up a few floors above us, so it's very convenient. And so we've had meetings with them, and we've had several regional meetings. We're having one in our district here in San Francisco on September 24th. And to give our staff and all of the agencies that do placement for our people we serve, there's going to be a training and to start those conversations and how we can connect.
Oh, great. So it sounds like this is definitely something that's moving, something that's on the minds of the staff of DOR as well, as how can we connect with these sorts of programs as well.
Yes, and also we're inviting all the local high school districts to this meeting because apprenticeship needs to start, when you're still in high school, all the way to people until the age of people don't want to work anymore. So it's for everybody.
That's great. So that one in San Francisco, you said, was on the 24th.
Correct.
Happening.
And I know you're signed up for it.
I'm signed up for it for sure. Yeah. And do you know if that training is actually happening in regions across the state?
Yes. I know the first one was in San Diego about 3 weeks ago, and I think last week there was one in the East Bay, and I think San Jose might be this week, and then we're like the last week of September. So yeah, they're all over the state.
Got it. Great. That's great. So I want to let us open up the phone lines and see if anybody in particular has specific questions. And I think, even if Teresa is unable to respond, if it's too specific, she may be able to respond. But if Teresa or June are unable to speak to the specifics of your particular region, could at least point folks in a general direction. And I haven't taken a look at any of the chat lists at all. But Eduardo, are there any questions on the list yet? Or does anybody want to pipe up and unmute your line if you are muted and chime in with anything in particular about your programs? Everybody has got a solid sense. I'm curious if there are programs, I didn't think about this ahead of time, but we could have done a quick little survey and see if there are any programs who are already connected with Department of Rehabilitation in one way, shape, or form in the particular regions.
You're asking on the phone, you're asking me?
Nope, I'm asking to the line itself.
Okay.
Perhaps not. Well, let me ask Teresa, do you happen to know, oh, there's one question that came in, but Teresa, do you happen to know if, offhand, if there are programs that are connected in the statewide? I don't know if you would know that.
Well, I guess I'm kind of confused by the question. What kind of programs you're talking about?
I apologize. Like if there are apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship programs that, I don't know if you've heard from any of your peers across the state yet, if there are offices that are connected with apprenticeship programs, but since we're asking to the group here, I wonder if you've heard of any of that. It sounds like you guys are right at the beginning of training for your staff.
You know, it's very individualized. We have had people involved. For instance, there's one just starting up here in San Francisco for vet tech for high school students. And it's a collaboration between the SPCA and San Francisco Unified and Foothill College on the peninsula, and they're training young people to be vet tech. And then they do their apprenticeship work at the SPCA. I mean, there's like little things here and there, and all of this can be found actually on the DIR website. It's all organized by county, and they'll like tell you what areas they serve. So that's the best resource that we look at in terms of apprenticeship. Right.
Yeah, the apprenticeship programs that are operating on DIR, the DAS site. So there was a question that came in on the line that asked if you knew if there was a joint DOR DIR Industrial Relations meeting that was happening in the North State area.
In the North Bay area, like Marin?
Sorry, the North State area. So I'm thinking perhaps more like either Humboldt or Reading, or up in the northern.
So we do have an office in Reading, and I would refer you back to our website to look for that office and contact them. Every major region of the state is having these meetings, and we're having them in August and September. There might be some in October, but I would contact them because I don't have a whole schedule of the offices. Gotcha.
Okay. In my experience, that there's typically at least smaller satellite offices, if not direct, larger scale offices in every region. I think Sharon was asking about Chico itself. So I would be surprised if there wasn't something in Chico as well.
Yeah, no, we have a Chico office also, and that region of the state, their district office is actually in Sacramento, called the Northern Sierra District. And so they would definitely have some sort of apprenticeship training in Sacramento. If they have some in the northern regions, they can inform you.
Great. Any other questions on the line? Anybody else wanted to chime in with anything or ask anything pressing? not hearing anything coming on the line. Okay, well then I want to take a moment just to say thank you so much, Teresa, and to June for joining us on the call and sharing a little bit of this information. Would you both be okay if we shared some contact information if people had follow-up questions where they could reach out to? Perhaps it would make sense just to reach out to their local offices themselves. But if there was anything else, you know, we'll post this recording up. But any other last words of wisdom or any information that you'd be willing to share should other questions come up down the line for grantees?
Well, people are welcome to contact me. You're welcome to share my information, or if they're having difficulty figuring out who to contact in a certain region, I know my counterparts throughout the state. I'm happy to make an introduction for that. And I look forward to seeing apprenticeships spread like wildfire, good kind of wildfire in our district.
Yeah.
We need more of that kind of collaboration to help people get jobs.
Absolutely. I think it's the direction that all of us are trying to push collectively. So it's great to have such a state entity working with us in that regard. Thank you both so much for your time today. And
Thank
sharing your knowledge with us. All right.
Okay.
And thanks,
have a good day, everybody.
We'll see you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
And thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.